car's tires screeched to a halt across the street from the hospital. Cal jumped out of the driver's seat and carefully carried her into the building. I watched as few of the hospital staff rushed over to him. I worried for a moment that they'd want to ask a few questions, but once the staff turned to focus on Kanya, Cal booked it back to the car, and we continued down the road. I glanced down at my hands. "You think she'll be okay?" Cal was silent for a few seconds, and I almost thought he wouldn't respond when he shook his head.
"Honestly, I don't know."
Cal told me that the man we were supposed to find was a vampire. Apparently, the reason this vampire can walk among humans during the day without the concern of combustion was all because of Ilium's blood. In payments, the vampire would deliver packages, food, and other various things for them. I remember the first time I'd seen a vampire, the same day I met Layla and Oliver.
"Vampires may look human," Oliver had said, "but their true form resembles that of a giant, monstrous bat out of hell." Or something like that. Of course, he told me that a few vampires work within the BSID. They only hunt down and capture rogue vampires and other rogue cryptids. I wondered what category the vampire we were looking for fell under. We decided to stay a night at a small motel just down the street from our destination, and the next day we arrived at the small restaurant down by the water around 6 in the morning. The place was cool, contrast to the hot-as-balls weather we had outside. My eyes swept around the room, and I made a sigh of relief when I noticed that the very few patrons inside were all human. A waiter guided us over to a small booth by the large window that overlooked the water. I ordered a coffee and a side of fries, and Cal ordered a Coke and a plate of animal-shaped nuggets. I eyed his choice before I took a sip of my coffee. Cal glanced up at his food.
"What?"
"Nothing," I answered. When Cal didn't drop his gaze, I sighed. "It's just a bit interesting. You know, out of all the options, you decide to order something off the kids' menu."
"So?" Cal struggled between bites. "Don't criticize my food choices." He picked up a lion-shaped nugget and held it up. "Look how adorable he is. Anyway, what about you?"
"What about me?"
"Well, all you ordered was a coffee and fries. Now that's interesting. At least I can have fun with my food."
He released a
"Rah, help me,"
as he slowly brought the lion-shaped nuggets up to his mouth before biting its head off. He grabbed the bottle of ketchup, pausing mid-squeeze, and placed it back on the table. He shifted slightly in his seat as he stared over at a table somewhere behind him. "I'm just saying, I'm also surprised you have the strength to eat after..." I leaned forward in my seat and dropped my voice to a whisper. "You were shot in the stomach?" Cal rolled his eyes. When he spoke, his eyes never deviated from the spot behind me.
"I already told you, the wound itself is healed. I just won't be able to shift. For how long, I don't know. That's why I need..." "Hey, don't turn around, you idiot!" Cal hissed. "I think we're being watched." I shook my head. "Don't worry, we're the only demons here. I already checked." Cal cursed and leaned in. "They're still watching us. And might I remind you that some demons have been known to use humans for their nefarious deeds."
"You never told me that."
"Whatever. It's common sense."
"Common sense? Seriously? Oh, come on, man. They're probably watching us because you keep staring at them." I scoffed. Cal was about to say something when he heard the door to the restaurant open. I watched as a tall, lean man wearing a long-sleeved gray turtleneck under a faded black blazer holding a black case in one hand walked in. His features were elegant and sharp like steel beneath a swoop of red hair. The young man grabbed a large paper bag from over the counter, bowed his head slightly, and turned. He was about to leave when his emerald green eyes landed on us. His thin lips pulled into a smile and quickly made his way over to our table. Cal slid over to make room for him to sit.
"What a surprise to see you here, Kalos," he said, his voice thick with an English accent. "It's been, about 2 years since we crossed paths." "Something like that," Cal nodded. Peter turned towards me. "And who is this young man?" Cal jerked his chin at me. "Peter, This is Gavin. Gavin, this is Peter.
Peter turned his attention to me, and I stiffened slightly in my seat when I noticed his very sharp fangs. He extended his hand, and as he shook my hand, he gave me an appraising look. The intensity of it made me feel uncomfortable. His grip was firm, and his touch cold and clammy. "It's nice to meet you, Gavin." He smiled. Nice to meet you, too," I said. After a few seconds, he withdrew his hand from mine and shifted his eyes to Cal. "I'm surprised to see you out and about in the open. Pretty unwise. Your pals are still out there looking for you."
Yeah, I know. But I wouldn't be risking myself like this if I wasn't desperate. I need Ilium's help.
Peter raised his head in the air and snapped his fingers.
There we go,
Peter said.
"Now, let me take a look at the damage, eh?"
Cal nodded and lifted his shirt up, revealing the wound on his stomach.
"Those bastards shot you with that," Peter hissed.
"Damn, man. Looks like it hurt like a son of a bitch."
"Yeah, it sure felt like it."
Cal winced when Peter touched it.
"Your hands are cold, man."
I made a cursory glance at the waiter coming back our way.
"The waiter's coming back," I hissed.
Peter looked over his shoulder.
"Oh, don't worry about him, Gavin.
My manipulation comes in handy for situations like this. These humans only see and hear what I want them to."
"Neat," I said. "Do you know where I can find Ilium?"
Cal interjected. "Of course, you're probably not going to like it, but Ilium's residing in the Shadow Market currently."
"The Shadow Market?" I asked him. "It's a market where supernatural beings go to purchase magical artifacts and such."
Cal interjected and slouched back in his seat.
"Damn it, that might make things complicated, but we're short out of options. We'll just have to." Peter's eyes brightened.
"If you need a disguise, I may just have the thing you need," he said, and pulled something out of his case. There were 2 face masks one would use for spas. "A lovely new product of mine, fresh off the workbench." Cal and I take the offered masks before eyeing Peter curiously. "These allow you to change your appearance. Just simply apply the masks to your face. You might feel a slight discomfort, but it works, trust me. These masks will work their magic for 2 hours before the mask dries up and you're back to looking like yourselves again. Oh, and they're free of charge, because Ilium likes you," he said to Cal. Peter got up from his seat and bids us farewell before he leaves the restaurant. Cal and I left the place a little while later and headed to a deserted public restroom to apply the masks. I opened the package and slowly lifted up a tan-colored mask. It was thin and wet to the touch. I carefully applied the material to my face, making sure it covered my nose, mouth, and chin. The change was almost instantaneous. I could feel a tingling sensation, and I only felt a slight discomfort. After the change was complete, I blinked in the mirror, and I tentatively raised my hands to my face. The tan mask was gone, blended into my skin. I looked older, maybe around mid-30s. My face was more round, and my nose was more pointed. Cal came around the corner and leaned up against the doorframe.
"Damn, over's face you're wearing. Age was not kind to him." I glared at him.
"Have you looked in the mirror?" The face he wore had angular features. There was a light scar stretched across the bridge of his sharp nose. He shook his head and cursed.
"Man, I wish Peter had better options. This face doesn't fit me at all. But it could have been worse."
"How long did you say these masks last?" I asked.
"About 2 hours. We should get going,"
Cal said. I followed closely behind Cal as we headed deeper into the forest just outside of town. I cursed silently as we made our way down a long stretch of trail, and I had to duck under hanging branches. After a few minutes of silence, Cal spoke.
"Tell me something,"
he said, his eyes kept forward, not looking at me.
"What happened back there with them douches?"
"I don't really know. One minute I was staring at her, at him, and the next I was somewhere else." I explained to him the best that I could of what occurred between Amducius and I. Cal suddenly stopped walking.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me that you managed to enter a demon's domain?
I guess? But like I said, I don't know how I did it, I said suddenly. I was just there. My hands trembled as I remembered the look of Amdusius' face before he was pulled into the weird gate in the wall. Cal whistled.
Holy shit. You exorcised him? You actually exorcised that bastard? You sure are full of surprises, huh?
Was that what I did to him? The scene replayed inside my head. The portal in the wall, the grotesque hands dragging him back into the void where they came from. Hey, is it possible for a demon to exorcise another demon? Cal shrugged.
I mean, probably. I don't know. And I never asked.
I had so many questions that I probably wouldn't get any answers to. At least not at the moment. Cal didn't seem to have the answers. I decided to change the conversation with a question I knew Cal had an answer for. So, who is this Ilium? You stated that they could help you, right? I asked. Cal simply nodded.
Ah, right. Ilium is a collector of sorts. They collect many different things, clothing, artifacts, and most importantly, medicine.
What are they? I asked. Demon?
No. Ilium's a fae.
Fae, I repeated. From what I've read about fae is that they were some kind of mythical creature from European folklore. Does Ilium resemble one from folklore? Or do they have a gorgeous physique, pointed ears, and a supposedly leg-spreading voice like in one of the romantic books Roland's mother loves to read? Now I'm just imagining what a fae werewolf hybrid would look like, and I laughed to myself.
What's funny?
Cal asked. What? It's nothing, I replied. We made our way down a ribbon path that twisted 100 yards or more through the forest. Looking ahead of us, I could see only trees of innumerable shapes and sizes, and most of them covered with moss and shaggy growths. We turned right and came up to a stone arch surrounded by large rocks and leafless trees. On each side of the arch, 2 stone wolves sat staring at each other. The stones looked as if they were built by someone who had no intention of making it perfect. Okay, well, that's random, I said. Suddenly, the large wolves on each side of the archway shook to life and circled us. I stumbled back. Oh, shit. Cal whispered.
Just relax.
I glared at him, and I swear one of them sniffed around my ass. After they both seemed pleased with themselves, they went back on each side of the arch and sat back in their respective positions. The archway shimmered to life, and the 2 of us went on through. My eyes widened as I glanced up at the towering buildings in front of us. Some were melded with a variety of little shops built so close to each other that they became an unending stretch of glass, wood, and rock. I spotted a rugged, middle-aged man with milky white eyes, with gray skin speaking rather aggressively to one of the shopkeepers that vaguely resembled a humanoid lizard. The short, chubby merchant behind the booth shook their head. Their thick green neck jiggled as they moved. Replying to the man in the same aggressive tone, the man growled something unintelligible under his breath and stomped away. As the 2 of us made our way up to the cobblestone streets, my skin began to crawl. Some of the beings looked like normal humans, while others looked vaguely so. They would yammer away about prices. Others stood around and discussed about minor trivialities or the weather. Steam carts rumbled down the street, spitting hot clouds of vapor. I had to avert my gaze as Cal and I passed by a large, wide-opened meat shop. A stench of something foul permeated the air. A tall, burly beast of a man walked out of the shop carrying slabs of meat that hung from long metal poles. I stood beside one of the booths across from the shop where he made his way across the street to speak with the guy. Suddenly, I felt a harsh tug on my arm, and I almost yelped. I whirled around to face whoever it was. A plump, elderly woman with a mouth full of sharp, obsidian teeth smiled up at me. Her greasy black hair was pulled up into a messy bun that bobbed as she craned her head up to get a better look at me.
Hello, sir,
she said. Her voice was soft.
I have a wonderful selection of jewelry.
This one is gorgeous, she said, happily picking up a blue sapphire bracelet. It looked expensive. I made a quick glance over my shoulder and was relieved to see Cal leaving the store. I turned back to the older woman, who still looked at me, saccharine sweet. I'm sorry, but I'm just waiting on someone. Let go of my hand, please. The woman's demeanor changed suddenly. Instead of letting go of my wrist, she tightened her grip, and I winced as I was forced to bow to her eye level. The stench of her breath reeked of something putrid. "You're not leaving, boy," she hissed. "You were staring longingly at my booth." Before she could finish her sentence, I grabbed her wrist and dug my fingers into her flesh. My claws lengthened as she cried out, and they broke skin. "Let me go." The woman released my wrist as if burned and shrank back behind her booth and rubbed at her wrist. I heard footsteps behind me and glanced up. "Is there a problem?" Cal asked as he came up to stand beside me. "No problem," I said simply. "Let's just go." I brushed past him and we continued up the street. We came up to a small brick building with green hedges. The inside was small. There were a couple of vacant offices down the hall to my right and to my left. There was a single large oval desk in front of a door leading downstairs. We suddenly heard movement from somewhere downstairs and a voice muttering something before shouting, "Have a seat. I'll be right with you." I was about to go and sit down when I spotted a large, opened wooden chest to my left, adjacent to the stairs. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside. My fingers brushed against the assortment of toys. I gingerly picked up a small porcelain doll. Its blue, checkered dress was ripped in places, and its auburn hair was matted onto one side. My fingers touched something dry and crusty near the back of the doll's neck. I felt a sudden hand on my shoulder, and I nearly panicked, almost elbowing the person behind me. I turned around and came face to face with a tanned-skinned, androgynous person with shoulder-length brown hair tucked behind his pointed ears that were decked in piercings, and a nicely trimmed beard. They wore a skin-tight white tank top under a black, transparent, buttoned shirt and black high-waist suit trousers. Their icy blue eyes were wide, and their full lips were pressed into a frown. "My apologies," they said quickly. "I didn't mean to frighten you." Then they said, "How may I help you two?" "Hey, Liam, it's me, Callows," Cal interjected, and he got up from his chair and walked over to stand beside me. Ilium narrowed their eyes for a moment before they said, "Callows, Peter told me you were coming, but..." Ilium leaned in and tilted their head. "Ah, he must have given you one of his masks, because this is not a face you would have chosen yourself. It doesn't suit you at all, hon." "Yeah, I'm thankful that it's very temporary. I'll have my handsome face back soon," Cal said. "Of course you will." Then Ilium's smile faded and sniffed. "It's been a while since I saw you last. Too long. And perhaps you might have forgotten me." Cal smiled. "You? I would never." Ilium chuckled at that. "What can I help you two with?" "I need your help removing a substance from my body. I won't be able to shift until it's gone," Cal said, as he slowly lifted the front of his shirt. Ilium bent down to inspect the bullet wound. "You were shot with a binding inhibitor. Not to worry. I have just the thing. Come." We both followed Ilium into one of the examination rooms. "I'll go grab the supplies. It will only take a minute." Ilium was halfway out the room when they whipped around and pointed to the bowl of candy on the counter. "Help yourself. They're absolutely delicious." I eyed the bowl to reach in to grab a piece when I remembered what Ilium was and jerked my hand away from the sugary goodness. "What's the matter with you?" Cal asked. "It's just candy. It's not gonna bite you." "Yeah, but isn't it a rule not to accept any types of food from Fey folk?" Cal just rolled his eyes and walked over and grabbed one that closely resembled a Tootsie Roll before he popped it into his mouth. "First of all,
he said in between chewing. This is store-bought candy. And second of all, that rule only applies to humans. You'll be fine.
I turned from him and glanced over at the bowl before I moved away from it and sat down in a chair beside the exam chair. Cal laughed.
Oh, come on. You're just being paranoid. You're really sure you don't want one?
I glared at him and crossed my arms over my chest. Yeah, I'm really sure. Cal shrugged and grabbed a small handful for later.
Fine. Suit yourself. More for me, then.
A few minutes later, Ilium came back with a wooden box tucked under their arm. They placed it on the counter and opened it. They grabbed a syringe and a vial filled with clear liquid. Cal hopped onto the examination table and lifted his shirt up. Cal inhaled sharply as Ilium disinfected the wound.
This will sting just a little,
Ilium said, right before they injected the needle into the scabbed-over flesh. I watched with no small amount of disgust as Cal was forced to grit his teeth to try and suppress his discomfort. After a few moments, Cal leaned his head back with a groan. He raised his right arm in front of him, and I watched as his flesh shifted into his demonic appendage. Cal released a sigh and laughed.
No, that's more like it.
He then turns to Ilium.
Thank you, Ilium.
Ilium smiled.
Of course. Now.
Conversation was suddenly interrupted by the front door of the building opening and closing. Did I just hear it lock? Ilium's head jerked towards the door, and then said quickly but quietly,
You two stay right here. I'll be right back.
I could hear Ilium speaking to whomever just walked through the door, and by the sound of their voice, they weren't happy. Ignoring Cal's whispering protests, I slowly peeked around the corner. Standing in the small lobby were two men. The taller man was attractive and dressed impeccably. He wore a black business suit with a crimson tie. He was probably in his late 30s with short black hair and sharp features. The other was a short, chubby, older man around his 50s with a balding head of brown hair wearing casual clothing. I wondered if it would be too suspicious for Cal and I to walk out when I saw the man in the suit point in our direction. I pulled my head in and quickly walked over to Cal, who told me to calm down. Yeah, easier said than done. Cal and I kept our cool when the man entered our room alone. He gripped the knob and closed the door with a click. We were locked inside with him. A cold sweat immediately broke out across my entire body. I could not stop staring at the man. The man's smile was sharp and his pale blue eyes devoid of any warmth. He wasn't a demon, otherwise I would have seen his true face. But he wasn't human either. Everything about this man screamed danger. I knew that I was fidgeting, which probably undoubtedly drew even more attention to us. But damn it, I was already hyper-aware of the area where my mask started to peel from my skin. The man eyed me for a moment before his eyes slid over to Cal. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folding piece of paper. "I'm looking for this man," he said, holding up a black and white photo of Cal. "Have you two seen him here by any chance?" I was about to speak when Cal said,
"No, we have not."
"Are you sure?" The man pressed. "Someone gave us a tip back in the human world that he and another young man were heading here. Kalos should have known that a vampire's compulsion doesn't work on a demon's familiar. In my honest opinion, Kalos isn't the brightest demon we hired. I mean, him coming here would be a very stupid decision. Wouldn't you agree?"
"Well, shit. We haven't seen them,"
Cal said, tightly.
"Is there anything else, or are we done here?"
The man frowned before a smirk slowly crept upon his lips, and he jerked his chin at Cal. "You got a little something on your face. Right there." The man raised his hands to Cal's face, and that was when all hell broke loose.
"Don't fucking touch me,"
Cal snarled. Just as he said that, I could hear commotion in the lobby. Cal's nails lengthened, and he immediately swiped at the man who jerked back, and Cal followed. The two of them struggled against each other before the man backhanded Cal in the face, sending Cal sprawling across the floor. The man was on Cal, and I could tell Cal's movements were a little sluggish as he fought the after effects of the shot. I quickly grabbed the back of the man's suit and pulled him away from Cal. The man twisted around and shoved me up against the wall and drew a knife from his belt. But then he hesitated. His strike wasn't for my throat or chest. It was for my leg. His momentary pause gave me just enough of a window to slip from his grip, just enough that the tip of his blade nicked me, and I hissed. Then the realization hit me. My greatest advantage. These guys Cal had worked with had no intention on killing me. I remembered what Cal had said when he was impersonating Azarian. They needed to take me in alive, so they couldn't kill me. Not yet, at least. I loosened my own blade and went straight for his heart. I guess Cal was right. Me being a demon meant I was capable of more than what I had first thought, because I didn't have to push in all that hard. The blade slid right between his ribs with ease. The man locked eyes with me for a moment, and there was something there that I couldn't decipher. Suddenly, he threw back his head and released a howl so loud that shuddered my body as it echoed through the building. I heard movement right behind me, and I quickly pushed him off of my blade and spun around, adrenaline coursing through me like an electric current. The man fell to his knees and stared at me for a moment before he collapsed to the floor.
Oh, right. It's the same blade you used on me.
Cal smiled as he came to stand in front of the man crumpled on the floor. Cal lifted his foot and nudged the man's shoulder. Then he turned around to face me.
You good?
Yeah, I replied. Now what? My words died in my throat as I spotted the man got to his knees, his head lowered. Cal glanced behind me and yelped.
Fucking hell.
As he quickly moved to where I was standing. How dare you put your foot on me, you filthy half-demon? The man growled out. Half-demon? I glanced over at Cal, whose eyes seemed almost black, and his expression close to downright murderous. The man lifted his face up. Blood started to spill out of his mouth, nose, ears, and corners of his eyes. They weren't blue anymore. They were crimson. The man tilted his head, his lips stretched into a rictus grin.
Who the fuck do you think you are?
He spoke the words clearly with that disturbing smile on his face. Suddenly, I heard an audible snap, and the man reeled back and hissed.
I knew you would be a failure.
He growled.
We should have killed you long ago.
There was another snap, and the man jerked sideways. Something was moving inside of him, and it was trying to force its way out. I turned for the door and tried to open it, but it stayed locked. I slowly turned around as realization settled in me like a cold stone. We were trapped inside a small room with whoever or whatever this man was.
Oh well, it's a small mistake, really.
He gritted out through the pain.
There are more important matters.
Then, he slid his eyes over to me for a moment, before looking back over at Cal.
Something bigger has plans.
The man groaned again, but he just kept on smiling. He kept smiling even when I heard the sound of his bones splinter.
It doesn't matter how many humans you save.
He choked out a laugh when he saw the look on my face.
Oh yes, we know what you did to Amdusias. Of course, possessing the body of humans is just the tip of the iceberg.
He choked on a guttural sob when his body arched forward and his back cracked and popped from some unseen pressure.
And the sweetest part of it all,
he said through gritted teeth.
the sweetest part is that the world won't see it coming until it's too late. Fuck. And let me tell you, the end result will be glorious.
I tried for the door again, but it wouldn't open. I cursed.
We are so fucked.
Cal muttered. There was an awful, wet, ripping noise as something large pulled itself free from its human suit and rose onto its four legs. The human body fell to the floor like an empty sack of flesh. The monster was canine in appearance. Obsidian fur sprouted all over its body, Its 4 long tails flexed back and forth. Something started to push its way out from different parts of its body. The hardened red bone formed an armor-like layer over its spine, the top of its head, ribs, and groin. Red and black, blade-like appendages sprouted out from just above its elbows. Its crimson eyes glared down at us. It was huge, slightly larger than a Great Dane. And those dogs are massive. The scent of brimstone permeated the air around us. The temperature in the room became stifling. For a moment there, I was sure that Cal and I were going to be screwed until the door to the room was blasted off its hinges. Cal and I dodged out of the way just as the door blew inward. The force of it knocked the beast against the wall. Cal muttered a "run." I didn't need to be told twice. Cal and I bolted for the hallway. Just as we left the room, a bright yellow barrier appeared between us and the monster in the room. I looked over my shoulder and saw Ilium with their hands raised. The beast snarled and brought its claws down against the barrier, which shuddered from the impact. Smoke poured from its mouth, the center of its chest glowing an orange color. It rose up its throat before releasing a ball of flame at the barrier. Cal released both his arms and flipped at the bird. The beast snarled at that and snapped its jaws. Ilium turned and motioned for us to follow them. We ran to the lobby and noticed the older man on the floor. Black blood seeped from his mouth.
What the hell is that thing?
I asked.
A hellhound.
Cal grimaced. Let's hurry. That barrier won't hold him for long, Ilium said. We quickly sidestepped the man's corpse and took off down a narrow set of stairs and through a long hallway carved out of rock. The lights along the wall cast an eerie glow. We turned a slight left and came up to a mahogany door. The wood seemed to shimmer, swirls of intricate designs etched along its frame. Ilium stepped up to the door where a keypad materialized on the right side and swiftly punched a code into its panel. After a few seconds, the door opened, and we went inside. We're safe in here. Just don't touch anything. Cal and I peeled off our masks and threw them inside a bin beside the door. The room was fairly large, and it had no windows. It was designed with expensive-looking furniture. The room would have looked even bigger if not for all the clutter. We had to worm our way around various objects. I almost bumped into a wide shelf crammed with multicolored glass vials in different shapes and sizes, filled with God only knew what. Some of them wobbled slightly, and I froze, waiting to ensure that none of them toppled over and broke. I released a sigh of relief when they didn't and continued on, and slowly edged my way past a table piled with old scrolls and sweet-smelling herbs. I turned to Ilium, who was muttering, "I know they're here someplace. Here? No. All right, hold on a sec." As I passed another table, something moved from the corner of my eye to my left. There was a large glass case, its frame covered in what looked like runes of some kind. In the center of the case was a black ball of shadow. I tentatively raised my hand and lightly tapped on the glass. Suddenly, the ball grew and then funneled and coalesced before it formed into a human-like shape no bigger than a small child. It didn't have eyes or even facial features, but I could hear faint, spidery whispers. It was all incoherent, but I knew that I heard it.
"I know what you are,"
it said. I cursed as I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Don't sneak up on me, dude!" I snapped. My concentration lapsed. The whispers went completely silent.
"What are you doing?"
Cal asked. "Did you not hear that?"
"Hear what?"
"Aha!" Ilium crowed. They leapt off a stool and strode up to us with a box under their arm. "I found it." Ilium looked up and frowned at me. "Be careful with that," they tisked. "I told you not to touch anything." "What is it?" I asked. "Oh, this is a shade, or what some people call a shadow person. But don't worry, as long as it's inside that case, it won't become a problem." Good to know," I muttered. Ilium placed the box on one of the tables and opened it. Nestled in the box were key cards. Ilium picked one out and held it up in front of us. "This room can be moved to different places around the world using these cards." Ilium slid the key card into the panel and pressed in a couple of numbers. They turned the knob, and the door opened up into a side street. I recognized the street we were on immediately. It was just a couple blocks down from the bar where Cal had found me at. What in the hell's moving castle?
Thank you for your help, Ilium.
Cal said, interrupting my thoughts. Ilium smiled. My pleasure, Kalos. Of course, I won't be able to go back to the Shadow Market anytime soon, but honestly, a change in scenery might be good for me. They said, both of you need to watch your backs. They're going to be out there searching for you, so try not to get shot again, or worse.
You know me.
Cal chuckled.
It'll take more than that to keep this demon down.
What about you? I asked.
Who? Me? Ah, you don't need to worry about me, Gavin. It isn't my first time on the run.
After we said our goodbyes, I followed Cal out into the street of the city. So, what's next? I asked.
You told me you were able to transform into your demon form, correct?
Yeah, I said, slowly. But that was completely unintentional. I don't really know how I did it. Like I said, it just happened.
Well, guess that settles it then.
Settles what?
Our next training session will be focused on your transformation into your demon form.
Cal smirked.
Then, this is going to be fun.